Hi everyone, my name is Sierra Charles, and my article is The Classroom Practices of Teachers on Learning Disabilities in Children. And the authors are Ranjita Goldie Vincent and Shobha G. So the article overview states, while we understand that students with learning disabilities exist in all types of classroom settings, and that could be a general education class, a special education class, or even a cluster group, we study classroom practices that are followed, mandated by the government. And private school teachers also do follow what is mandated by the government in handling children with disabilities. This article studies the differences in the practice levels as well as socio-demographic factors of the teachers in the classroom and their level of understanding classroom practices. The approach used in the study was called convenient sampling. And convenient sampling is a non-probability sampling that basically involves the sampling population that is close at hand. And it usually involves pilot study. So the author's perspective. The study was conducted to understand various techniques that public school teachers as well as private school teachers handle how they handle disabilities within the classroom. And for a lot of general education teachers now, that is becoming even more prevalent. You will have, students that do have learning disabilities in a general education class, and will have pullouts where special needs children do end up in general education classes for an hour or two to integrate them, to get them to understand how general education classes move, and with the hopes that they do get into a general education class very soon, full time. And it's really cool to watch that because the child kind of actually gets a taste of both worlds when they do, pull outs like that. I've gotten to witness that, and it's a beautiful thing because, they do spend majority of their time in a, special need or ASD class, and then you know, they've got that 1 hour pullout of going to a different classroom with a different teacher with different kids, and they're able to get integrated. They're able to pick up the material. They're able to develop friendships. And when you see the difference and the transition when they go back to the special education class, a lot of the times they are performing higher levels in the class. So they use certain demographic for the teachers, like monthly income, place of residence, and present school experience. That was also used in the study. So how long has the teacher been teaching? Do they have any experience with children with learning disabilities? Do they have any experience with children, for instance, that have traumatic brain injuries? For example, I did have a student, he did not have, you could not see anything physical on him. And he was in uh, I guess you could, it was a special needs classroom, but a lot of the times they had general education. It was like a mixture between the two. And he did suffer a traumatic brain injury where the cord as a newborn was wrapped around his neck, and he did lose oxygen. So he was able to, do majority of the work, but he did have issues with his train of thought, with focusing. He could not, focus for long periods of time. And then last but not least, Gender was also a feature that presented different challenges in the classroom, which is something I'm very familiar with, and it's very interesting to understand that perspective, whether you're, a male or female teacher, how the kids, regardless of whether they have learning disabilities or not, how they get implemented to you is very important. And it really, gender is very important. Reactions. Before reading the article, I did have misconceptions about learning disabilities and how they are handled in the classroom. So, from reading a lot of the special education books, I do know that there is a chain that most teachers do follow when they do have a student that may be struggling, especially in primary education. That's when, you start noticing, okay, maybe this student may have an intellectual disability, maybe they're very forgetful, they're not focusing, they're not paying attention correctly, they're off task. So primary education is extremely important because, it kind of serves as a prevention. It serves, as a start for getting the intervention as soon as possible before they start reaching milestones with their age. So, important factors such as association with schools offering regular training programs for teachers that dealt with awareness of students with learning disabilities and best practices, that was extremely important because attending workshops, continuing education are all needed to keep up to date with how to handle students with learning disabilities in the classroom. As a volunteer, I've volunteered and I was an assistant. I've seen time and time again where the child does have a learning disability, and that can also come with behavior issues. So that child may be, very impulsive. They're easy to set off, especially if they're trying to communicate with another child and that child does not understand them because they may have a speech issue. So, and they get upset because they don't feel understood. So, it's very important for the teacher to be able to handle all aspects regarding the child with a learning disability and the child that doesn't have a learning disability. And the last is very specific trainings that are inclusive education intervention measures as well as counseling teachers. And that had in the study the most positive impact on students with learning disabilities and their families. A big misconception that people don't realize is that how the student learns, the progress and the goals that they take home to their families, and their families can see the change, which is why it's so important, especially, when you do have a child maybe with a learning disability, for instance, a life skill like going to the bathroom. um Maybe they're not picking it up, and it is a disability. It can be a disability, and it is a life skill that they need to have. I've had a teacher that said, no, we're going to nip this in the bud. And I was the assistant, and we tried every single day. We focused on potty training, and toward the end of the year, that child definitely improved. In the beginning of the year, that child was not even being verbal of, hey, I need to use the bathroom. That child, most of the kids, they knew that they had to go, and they either ran to the bathroom or they raised their hand, or they just came up and said, I have to go. But that child did not. And towards the end of the year, that child became very accustomed to getting our attention to let us know what they need and where they're going. So the implications to practice. Implications in the study is that it is recommended for improving the classroom practices of teachers. in order to help the students as well as give them the same opportunities as children without learning difficulties. And government authorities will have to be informed of measures such as related to trainings and intervention measures to help teachers become empowered. If the teacher doesn't understand how to help that student, that teacher may not feel confident. It is extremely important to empower the teacher so that they understand how to handle their classroom, and they can also help another teacher who may have the same student or a similar student or a similar situation in the class. In the study that was conducted, uh, it does say that you know teachers do learn best from other teachers, veteran teachers. So a lot of veteran teachers have really, come out and have helped new incoming teachers, because it can be intimidating when you are giving certain direct instruction, but you're having to do it in various ways because you have different children that may be performing on different levels, regardless of their age or their grade level. And it also talked a little bit about private institutions. It does say that they have an availability of options, maybe a little bit more than government institutions, because they are mandated by law, but they also can cater to a specific group more so than public institutions, because there is that level of funding and they're not subject to the certain guidelines of regular public education. They can sort of, make a little bit of their own guidelines and what works best for the school. So, you know, for private institutions, if they want to, do something on Saturday where they have special education teachers come and have a day on Saturday, whether it's a planning day or whether, children will be at the school on Saturday getting instruction, they can implement that. They definitely have options that, you know, will help depending on how they're funded. And so these are my references. And I really think it's an extremely important topic because a lot of people, especially in primary education, that's when, certain patterns of learning disabilities start showing their way. And then you do get a lot of teachers, realizing, especially if they're in middle school, that, hey, maybe they're a little bit behind, and you see the reflection of their work from primary to middle school. And, even for me as a past student, it does trail. Whatever you did not get in primary school, it will be followed in middle school and in high school. So, if a child doesn't understand a particular material or something in the curriculum that they're not understanding, it is extremely important for them to get that early intervention, to whether they need speech therapy, whether it is occupational therapy. And I do like how it's important for all different levels of professional occupational therapists, speech therapists, as well as a general education classroom teacher and a special education classroom teacher. They all work together for the same goal, and to help that child and their families. Thank you.